And we're live. Kind of popping up out of nowhere for episode 53. I realize I have been absent for quite some time. I apologize for that, but life happens. Obviously, as with the background, I am back in Pennsylvania. I have been bouncing around between Illinois and Pennsylvania. I still work out of the DC area for the time being, and spent some time down at the southwest border. Got to do some herping, but all of that meant that I wasn't doing very much for the podcast. I'm back in Pennsylvania for the most part full time, going to a new spot tomorrow that is straight days. So having Sundays off will help me out with timing for this. So kind of back in the mix. I am going to put a thumbnail up. I went live this time instead of scheduling it, so there wasn't a little blurb for you guys to see ahead of time. But I wanted to talk about the kind of the trade, I guess, pet trade, reptile industry, however you want to categorize it. I took a heavily cropped picture at a big box store so that you guys could see what species of lizard it is, a price tag, and hopefully not any identifying markers for the store, so I don't get in trouble for that. But it was an ornate Eurymastix at a big box store. And the reason I took that picture and it sparked me to want to have an episode and discuss it originally stemmed off of the morph market auctions and a whole bunch of discussions in group chats and different reptile groups and how that was going to affect things. And then I was fortunate enough to go to the Hamburg Reptile Show in their new venue, which was absolutely bonkers. It was really awesome. I was super glad I got to go to that, but I waited in line for a very long time along with everybody else that was there. But it really kind of put a spark in me to want to discuss that because I thought when I saw it, I only really had positive thoughts on it. What I saw was an ornate Eurymastix. It was like $3.99 or something at the store, which is kind of expensive. Okay, fine, but not really for a Eurymastix, and definitely not for a captive bred ornate. That's pretty fair. And I showed some folks and was talking in the group chat and things, and it kind of continued the original discussion off of like morph market auctions and things like that and how they were starting to affect the industry. And I actually thought it was really cool. I still do. I watch a lot of that stuff. I go on the BSR auctions website very often. I go on morph market auctions pretty often. I bid on some stuff randomly when I see weird things that I like. I have won a couple of things from there. I've used it. What's up, Mike? Yeah, I'm back. And again, sorry I was gone, but life kind of happens. No, so I have been watching those sites and kind of watching more of the stuff that I like. I don't watch the ball python prices as much. I do from the idea of what I do with them, which is shows and showing kids and things like that. So the single gene, stuff that sticks out to people. Pieds are always cool. Ivories are always cool. Albinos, the things that are just standout items, I guess, from a sales point of view. Like it's always going to look cool on your table to have yellow and white, stripy things. That's why striped corns, banded and striped king snakes, like the origin of doing all this stuff. It is carried into ball pythons, and then they just blew it out of the water with all of the variety that they're doing. I am actually going to try and make it to Monitor Fest on Saturday, May 25th. Mike, thank you for putting that in the chat to put out to everybody else who may or may not have known. Check out Brian Waterloo's Instagram, Waterloo, WATERLOO_lace. And he has a bunch of information about Monitor Fest on his Instagram. You can DM him and check that out. It is Saturday, May 25th. Mike, I will definitely get you a shirt. It's a really cool event. I have not been able to go, unfortunately. I'm really hoping to go this time. because I will be home during that time frame. Uh, there you go. Mike tagged him in the chat. So for folks that are listening to the episode who aren't live, if you come back and check out YouTube, Mike is putting up comments for it. Thank you for doing that, Mike. I really appreciate it. No, that's especially for really any reptile nerd, but monitor and lizard nerds, it's a big deal. It's a lot like Carpet Fest. You don't really need to own a carpet python to get a lot out of Carpet Fest. Talking to those people, meeting those people, hearing how they keep, just getting to hang out and swap stories and talk about feeders and all the random things of our hobby. It's really cool to hear what everybody else is doing. So when you get into something like monitors where you could be talking to people with Ackies or talking to people with croc monitors, like the variety is so huge that there are any number of subjects that could get really into the weeds. You end up talking to somebody like Mike, who has, crazy enclosures, all sorts of different species, breeding, his substrate mix, his heating methods. I mean, you can do a dissertation on a handful of those subjects just hanging out talking to him, and somebody probably should. No, so I wanted to make an episode specifically about the idea of the pet trade reptile industry pricing, I guess, type of thing that I had been seeing going on, because I approach, I think, the reptile market differently than a lot of people that I see in the group chat for our network, in general, just talking to my reptile friends of what they're looking at, what I'm looking at. Doesn't really seem to be necessarily the same things. I think we are in a really good place, but it doesn't maybe feel that way to a lot of folks. And what I mean by that is, like, some people would be really upset to see a Euromastix and some fairly pricey blue tongue skinks with morphs and different things at a big box store. And I think that's crazy, because I think that's an awesome step for us as the reptile hobby, because those herbivorous lizards, agamids, and fair size skinks, something bigger than a 5-line that a little kid won't crush or something like that, are awesome. They're awesome pets. There's a reason that first-time pet keepers want bearded dragons, leopard geckos, crested geckos, balls, corns, things like that. And they have built an entire base for all of us to then expand to all the crazy things that we have. And all of the money that came into the reptile industry with the boom of the ball python market allowed for the infrastructure, I guess, in like lighting and enclosures and all these different ideas, where even if the enclosures don't necessarily work for you, you can go on Chameleon Academy, you can go watch Mike's stuff, you can go to Armin and check out Weird Anoles, you can go Facebook stalk Ron St. Pierre and learn how to farm reptiles in Florida. I mean, there's so many different things that it's kind of the rising tides bring all ships type of thing, of where you guys will see the picture when I post it as the thumbnail for this episode, but it's just kind of a fat little baby ornate Euromastix laying on some reptile carpet, chilling out, with a little price tag thing underneath of it, because I had to, crop the picture a little bit so I wouldn't hit any trademarks or what have you. But cool. That's awesome. Heat, UV, they sell all the packaged foods for herbivores. They sell Repashy and all these different companies have all these different foods and things. You can outfit a Euromastix, a blue tongue skink, a bearded dragon, a what have you, at a big box pet store. You can get your lights and get all your things. I think that's really cool. That is a huge benefit for all of us that are maybe into the weirder stuff, or are, trying to push it with the different things that we're keeping, and maybe not having as much success, or trying to figure out the successful ways. Casey Cannon was just saying in our group chat that someone bred Halmahera scrub pythons in a grow tent. I have a grow tent right there that you can't hear when I'm pointing, but I'm pointing right off screen, that I was keeping a couple of things in. Folks in the group chat, in the network, keeping peach throats and arboreal indo monitors and those things. It was just one of those steps that somebody took, and the rest of us looked at it and were like, dude, that's genius. I'm going to try that out. And now I have a water python, and that I think is going to be the next resident of my grow tent when I get some different things. I want to change that a little bit just because of that particular species. He has some more requirements. He's a little bit bigger than the things that were in there before. But no, it's just those things. Like you get mini halogens. Okay, and now you don't need monster bulbs. Cool. Arcadia is more in the States now, and then they're starting to advance their stuff. They have larger platform type lights that a lot of zoological facilities are using. We can buy them. They came out with the Luminize thing. Places like VivTech have a whole range of UV options for us now. Like, so the idea that you can go to big box pet store, whatever, ornate Uromastyx, which is a super cool lizard species. They're beautiful. They're Euros, so it's a rock that likes to eat seeds and lettuce. They're awesome. They're a great lizard. They just have really specific requirements. Okay, cool. You can go online. You can go to Project Herpeticulture. You can go to Arids Only on any social media. You can check out all of his stuff, see exactly what he does, shrink that down because you don't need to make giant kiddie pools if it's your only lizard because you just came to a big box store for your pet. 40 breeder, 75 when they have the $1 a gallon sale. Knock it out. Awesome. That's unheard of for when somebody like me started, that it would be a captive bred ornate Euro in a store, not a reptile specialist store. It's not $1,000. Like, it's just right there. And then you walk around, and I wish I had taken a second picture, but you walk around the little, end cap or whatever it is, however they position their reptiles. And they had beardeds and balls and leopards and some other stuff. And they had ivory blue tongues. They had mourning geckos. They had Pac-Man frogs were the ones that my kids were all looking at. All things that we don't have an ivory, but we have blue tongues and things. All things that we have, and they were super stoked. They were like, "Hey, Dad, check it out! Like, they have cool stuff." Like, my kids actually said, "Oh, they have cool stuff," because they are a little too snobby for their own good and have kind of moved past leopard geckos and things like that. They still have the little kid enjoyment of them where they like to hold them and play with, crested geckos and watch them jump and things like that. But they're educated enough that they have interest in other things. And they saw them at a regular quote unquote pet store. And I think that is really good for all of us. I don't see a downside to that. I do know in a thank you, Mike. My kids love visiting you every time we're at NARBC. I got to get them up to your wife's place to show them all the crazy fish and stuff. They would lose their minds. For those of you that don't know, Mike's wife runs a fish wholesale, and it's super awesome. And she always has really cool stuff. Yeah, great people, just in general. But anyway, sorry, sidetrack for kids as usual. No, I know a particular part of our hobby that doesn't necessarily like the idea of the big box store currently is the dart frog folks. And I think that one's hard in the idea being that it's a little, or feels a little puppy mill because of some folks' ability to produce dart frogs in large numbers because they're amphibians. They breed in large numbers, or some species do. But the flip to that is, I just don't feel like we should be slamming them. I feel like we should be wanting the stores to be better educated, maybe, because they have access to powdered supplements. They have access to good lights. They have access to fruit flies. The store, you can walk in the store in probably either of the two major big box pet stores, and they don't sell Frogs and Co. tanks anymore, which is kind of annoying, or at least they don't by me. But when they did, you, I mean, you could walk in the store and build the entire thing, get the frogs, and you could set the whole thing up. The resources are available all right there to functionally provide for those animals. And so I understand wanting to hold the producer of the animals accountable because they are likely aware that some of those stores are not doing as well with their employees. And the frogs are suffering for it, which sucks. I agree that sucks. But it isn't because they're sending out their frogs to some barren wasteland. They're not. They're sending their frogs to a place that has all of the available resources in-house to appropriately care for those frogs. And then when the frogs get there, they either do that or they don't. I think that comes to us. I think that's us. We have to, hey, you can't rescue them buying them at the store because they're just going to replace them. You have to know how economics work. You have to know how the market works and understand those things, and that sucks. Absorb the feeling that sucks. Tamp down that want to rescue them, and hold your store, your local store, accountable for how they care for those animals because they have the resources available to them. I do understand being upset with the producer, like, hey, this sucks and you're sending it to a place but they don't have any foreknowledge of whether or not a particular store is not good. And I'm not really sure if there's a feedback mechanism other than us telling them, hey, store number whatever. And that is a corporate way to do that. Stores are numbered and labeled and have accountability and chains of command and all sorts of things. Are options for us to say, hey, store number 7 or whatever, where I live, their frogs look like crap. They don't eat well. They're not using their fruit flies. They put crickets in there, whatever the case may be. I do live. Thank you. But the flip to that is that you should, in some way, praise the stores that are doing well. The pet big box pet store that I didn't finish the name of here in Pennsylvania, where I live. I go there all the time, just window shop and be nosy and check out stuff because I'm a nerd and like to look at it. They have frogs pretty routinely. They keep them by species in cubes with small pieces of pothos, a bunch of moss, feed them fruit flies. I've hung out and talked to the dude and watched him feed and stuff. Like, killer. Super cool. They do a really good job. I also miss mom and pop shops, Mike. We are very fortunate living in Illinois that we still have a couple. I know other parts of the country that really sucks that they miss out on that. I don't disagree. Mom and pop shops are awesome, but the usual idea is that they, in a smaller setting like that, would get more individualized care and would theoretically then do better. But the way a lot of the big box stores are set up, like the fish and reptile person or a handful of people that rotate the shift throughout the week or whatever, there really are a handful of people responsible for these particular sections. Um, and again, it's anecdotal because I only go to like what, two in Illinois and one or two here in Pennsylvania. Um, but those people are usually someone that at least has an interest in that. Usually it is a fish person that got transferred over. But occasionally they'll hire a invertebrate nerd or something that happened to really be into reptiles. Um, but no, I do think that they're doing better with that. And I think a big part of that is the infrastructure that's available to them. You can open the box for a lot of the lights and see, oh, hey, this is what this is meant for. Zilla, Zumet, whoever it is, it doesn't matter. A lot of it's plug and play. So even if you had an employee that was like, hey, when you're done sweeping out the birds, go change the light bulbs for these things. They're, over in aisle 4. It's plug and play. They can look and read, no, we store use, these for desert, these for temperate, knock it out. Like, it's not difficult for them to do those things, and they don't really require advanced knowledge because they're not necessarily keeping advanced species. People feel like dart frogs and things are advanced species, and they are in the long term or in a large collection, I feel, because of how difficult it can be to keep their parameters. That is completely negated if you live in a place that has good like if you live in the southeast where it's already humid, you're 2 steps ahead of the game from Illinois, from the southwest. Holy cow, you're way ahead. There are a lot of ways that you can mitigate that, and especially in a store where you have all of these open supplies. I don't know. I just think that bringing that base level up is only going to help us. And again, anecdotally, I only have my stores to reference, but I don't see these higher priced, quote unquote, slightly more advanced or what have you animals. They're not suffering in the stores by me. They're healthy. They look good. The Uromastyx in Illinois didn't move as fast. I know they're still, or at least last time I was home, they're still on the shelves. The Uromastyx here sold fairly quickly. I know both states that I bounce back and forth, the morph blue tongues have sold really well for them. People have a lot of interest in those. They look super cool and they're an awesome pet. I mean, that's a no-brainer. You should be able to knock those out of the park as a big box store. But I don't know. I think people wanted to be upset about that initially, and I think it's going to be a good thing. I really do. I was excited to see it. And that actually led me, Indy was out here with me, and she and I went to the Hamburg show at the new spot. They had a new venue for the first time in years and years and years. And we got to go. Madhouse, absolute madhouse, total mayhem, line out into the parking lot, vendors wall to wall, people everywhere. It was awesome. So cool. Huge diversity of animals, tons and tons of people, people from all over this part of the country. There were people in line by us talking about being down in DC, people talking about Virginia, people talking about different cities in Pennsylvania, people that were driving from even farther out than that. All sorts of discussions going on because we were in line for quite a while, which, that's cool. And a huge number of people, just a huge variety of, I don't know, ability levels, I guess. I don't know, keeper knowledge levels, however you want to say it. A bunch of people looking for pet species, checking out ball python morphs and things like that. And then a lot of people that were there to specifically talk to XY breeder about their thing. Because because it brought all kinds. Indy and I ended up getting some Burmese pythons. That was our goal for that show. We're trying to do some different stuff for our educational shows. Last year, Petco had sail fins. I agree, Euromastics and Blue Tongue makes sense for some of the big box stores, but some of the things they carry, sometimes I do find questionable. I agree. And I don't know because I've never worked there, but I would bet that a big box store having something like sail fins is two things. One, the manager or whoever does the ordering doesn't know what that is. Number two is they do know what that is, or an employee, more likely an employee knows, because that's totally what I would do. I just think in my head, like, if I work at a big box store, I'm ordering the coral that I want, I'm ordering the reptiles because they get a discount. And if it's accessible, yeah. The downside is that they probably wanted one and then the store had to order three or something of that nature, would be what I would guess happened. I don't know, but I believe it would be one of those two. Either the manager, ordering person, what have you, didn't know what that lizard was, or somebody knew what it was and they wanted one and they got sent more than one. I would bet that's where my money would be. But I do agree that, yeah, I mean, they still make mistakes, sure, and point it out, tell them. They did say corporate sometimes just sends them things. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge store thing. You know, somebody somewhere in marketing, management, what have you, was like, this is the next great idea. Send it to these 5 stores as a test sales or whatever. That happens in everything. Paint, wood, whatever. Market testing and moving different products. The downside is the stuff that we're interested in is a product, but it's alive. The person selling it might not necessarily view it as all that much more than a product, which sucks. And again, tell them, hey man, here's why you shouldn't do this. You know, this is a bad idea. This, you know, whatever the case may be. And how you convey that to them would probably tell you whether or not you'll be successful. And if you hang out and talk to people like that and are knowledgeable and you're, you know, be cool. Just, hey, why you guys got sail fins? They get really big. They got specific care. It's a little crazy, kind of expensive. It doesn't seem like a good idea. It's probably going to be hard for you to sell them. Like, that's just a weird thing. You might end up hanging out here in the story of, oh, well, Jim wanted one and now he's got his. And, you know, that you'd be surprised what you would learn if you just hang out and, what's what? Like, I ended up with a whole batch of hairy scorpion babies that way because I was window shopping a bunch and the manager was hanging out and I was explaining that we use scorpions for shows and they glow and kids love it, blah, blah, blah. Oh, that's cool. This, that, and the other thing. Don't see the guy for 2 weeks or whatever. Came back in. Hey, what's going on? You got anything cool? What's going on with the fish? You know, just be cool. Hey, you come over here. Check this out. And I look in there and I was like, yo, did your desert Harry have babies? That's awesome. And he's like, yeah, but I am not cool with just selling this to people. Like, I don't know what to do about that. You know, what do you think? And I was like, I mean, I could take the babies if you want or what have you. And the guy just plugged in a manager discount, gave me a discount for mom, and I took mom and the babies. Cool. And he was like, I don't know if they're not going to get enough care here. They're too little. They need more help. Yeah, cool. No problem, man. For us, we can absorb that into our show schedule, not stress out. We have multiples of things, so things don't get stressed out, especially in the summertime with it being hot. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'll help you. No problem. And a desert hairy is actually a cool pet. That's the great desk pet species. That is something they should carry. Like, yeah, good. Yes, thank you. That was a good job. And I told him, hey man, yeah, that's the right thing to do. I'll help you out. Cost me like $20 or whatever it was. Like, yeah, I will help you out. And it's a store. So the way that I can help that or support that positive behavior, I had to buy something. Like that, their job is to sell stuff. Um, I was very polite in asking them not get any more in. We had a good discussion about it. Yeah, that's it. And because again, their goal is to sell stuff. And when you tell them, hey, man, this is a dead end. Like there's maybe it's Jessica. You're who would buy that. You and Alex. And or if I end up your way. Um, like it's just that's silly. It makes no sense for you as a product. That space would be much better served for a Cresty or a Chihuahua, or you want to get something weird, get a Lychee or whatever. Like you can offer any number of things that are a way better idea that could take up the same amount of space on a shelf in a retail store. That is a better idea for them. If it's a good idea for them as a person selling at a no-name giant store, and it's a better thing for that animal, and it's a better thing for all of us, cool. Rock out with your ivory blue tongues. Enjoy every Pac-Man frog color under the sun. They're an awesome pet. Kids love them. They're fat. They eat mealworms by the bucket. Killer. Keep cranking. Good for you. Like be supportive of that. Get a little cube. Get yourself a fat desk frog. Cost you $25, and you're telling your big box store that they're doing right. Awesome. But anyway, a huge sidetrack to Hamburg, the new Hamburg. And so we went there. And when I was walking around, I was looking at, we were just there for the berms. So we immediately got what we needed. No big deal. On that note, those were reasonably priced, pretty cool. A couple of vendors had them. I don't see granite berms nearly as often anymore. And so I picked up one of those because I love that snake. What I was actually specifically there for was a normal. We used an albino, of course, because at every kid show or school, you have to have the big yellow snake. And Teresa wanted a normal to compare and contrast. We have super crazy striped albino retic and a tiger girl. So we have some differences there, but they're not nearly as big as our huge albino yet. And so the normal, and they were babies, so super long-term thing, but just to be able to show kids, this is what they look like, and this is how you lose melanin, things like that. Awesome educational animal. But the market part of being there was, those were not that expensive. A handful of breeders had normals. A lot of things had for albino. A lot of people wanted the pearls and things like that. We only ran across the one guy that had the granites, which are what I really like. And so got that. As usual, I saw one person that had greens. I didn't get it because it didn't fit what we were there shopping for. I'm mad I didn't get it. The thing I've said in so many shows and venues and chats and everything else is about a green berm, and I see them and I never pull the trigger. I don't know why. I don't just get it. But even those were there. It was only one vendor, but they were there. But on the ball python side of things, which is where the world was ending because of auctions, I see that in a different way. I think maybe as well, because Indy and I were walking around, and our thing is like the multi-gene stuff, breeder stuff. It just doesn't help us for shows. Um, Whoa things help us because we're showing little kids for the most part, usually elementary to middle school age kids. Pieds, ivories, stripes, albinos, and all of those, all varieties of those that were not multi-gene, you know, things that would be useful for breeding in the future, like $250. Not babies, fair size animals, year maybe. Um, all of them, all the single gene, cool that I think cool looking things, like $250. And I know that that is a drop from pieds were 400 for ever and ever and ever. And it price wise lowers the base of the market. I understand, but I think it it really expands your market of people that is accessible to. Because from my perspective, those things, those particular animals are cool to kids. They're cool to everybody thinks pied is cool. If you don't, you're weird. Albino, it's cool. Like when you, oh, that's cool. It it's cool. It looks cool. It's visually appealing. And it's really visually appealing to children. Children don't have any money. They have a huge interest in fun, cool, creepy crawly things. And their parents have the financial means to put money into the reptile industry, the reptile trade, the hobby. That keeps all of us afloat, keeps the industry side going, the infrastructure development of lights and enclosures and all these different things. That keeps that going. Because I'm not going to buy 10 of those. I would buy one. And they live a long time, and I know what I'm doing, so I'm very unlikely to kill it early in its life. I probably will have it for a what should be a normal adult lifespan. I won't need another pied ball python for 20 years. I won't need another albino ball python for 20 years. I'm going to get 4 snakes and be done. Every year there's a new crop of 7-year-olds that think bright yellow, bright white. It's cool. And it benefits all of us to have those folks better able to join the hobby. And the real way you do that is to lower the price point for some of those things. Not everything. And realistically, there are some things where it feels like gatekeeping, mostly because it is. But I think for good reasons, right? Like that. Mike, thank you for chiming in. Most of the monitors that Mike produces are a little more expensive. They should be. They're pretty big. He's really into water monitors. He is very successful with them also. But you probably shouldn't just go buy that the way you can buy a bearded dragon. Because you can't turn around in big box store, whatever, and get all the supplies for it. You can't. So the idea that it would be a similar price point or a similar availability doesn't make any sense, because all of the things that are attached to that are more. Okay, well, then it's going to be more expensive. I personally love croc monitors, and I really want to do a gnarly display for them. And in our state, that's a huge thing. That Teresa and I have gone around on a little bit. Not with us, with state folks and some other folks. The animal itself, very, very expensive. It should be, right? Right. You shouldn't just show up and buy that, even as a baby, because of the responsibility it carries as an adult, because of the needs as an adult. Other than lighting, I mean, you're not everything else. You're making it, you're building it, or you're paying a professional to build it, and it's going to have probably nothing to do with the pet trade and everything to do with carpentry and really cool concrete work. If you're Ari, you guys got to go check out his social media, or Reptilandia's social media, for the tree they made for the croc monitors. So cool. But no, I understand that part, right? But Ackies were $400 forever and ever and ever. And I just saw an Ackie in one, I think it was Morph Market, fairly certain, one of the auctions, which might show a lower price point. I think that's kind of cool. Yes, like Mike says, it gives drive to the young up-and-comers, a goal to achieve. Yeah, I have always said that this should be treated like a hobby, like an artistic hobby. And I don't think there's anything wrong with going from Ackies to Indos, or maybe something black throatish, smaller water subspecies, to a big old Asian water, to what have you. I don't think there's anything wrong with the progression as a younger person. As an adult, can you just go buy a baby blackthroat and figure it out as you go? Yeah, sure. If you have the financial means, you can go online and basically learn all of this, and then spend the money and build and acquire what you need. You'll be fine. You're a grown-up. You have grown-up money. But if we're talking about building up the hobby, I think, given obviously what I do is educate with reptiles, I think you're talking about kids. And to me, it just makes sense, right? Like Chameleon Academy, fantastic. A lot of that feel, when you look at it from the perspective of an adult who has spent a lot of time in the reptile hobby, a lot of that's geared toward things like panthers. And when he's talking to the advanced folks who are listening to him, it talks about night drops and cool temps and mountain species like Jacksons and things like that, and talks about the really advanced life cycle of things like veileds and how that makes them difficult pets and so on and so forth. Cool. Sounds like a really big driver towards something like panthers, which for that particular grouping of delicate lizards are awesome. Great pets. You can more or less outfit them from a pet store, not really from the Chameleon kit, but you can put it together on your own. A couple of hardware store things, some plant pickups from the hardware store, rock and roll. That's good. That's good for everybody. Like the idea that you can get them into that, they can be successful, they can follow a pattern, rock it out. Males are gnarly looking, red, blue, yellow bars, killer stuff. Someplace like iPardalis has lineage charts and epic animals. Then you grow up, you have some adult money, you can figure out your basement gets cold and you want to try a Jackson's and a live bear, and all right, cool, go ahead, man, knock yourself out, right? Like colubrid people, you all are really pushing into Asian colubrids now because you're grown-ups. And it turns out heating and feeding a bunch of Pituophis that like to eat small rats and then crap them out is a really big pain in the butt. So what are you doing? You're sticking Asian colubrids in your basement because it's easier to heat them because they don't really need it. And they maybe eat a little slower. They maybe eat a little smaller. You're figuring it out. You grew up. You had corns and kings and milks turns into bulls and gophers and pines. And then it's like, oh my God, bulls and gophers and pines get huge and they're really difficult and they crap everywhere and all the downsides, right? And if you don't mind that, and yeah, I like cleaning, I like big old snakes that just get after it, then you go to indigos, then you go to false water cobras, then cool, rock out. If you get tired of that, and then you're like, oh, really rat snakes are the carpet pythons of Australia. That's kind of similar. And you see these people start to transition. And then vice versa. Super into carpet pythons. Owen, now you're crazy diverse into colubrids because you found a lot of similarities and figured out what works in your room after 15 years. Awesome. Cool. But you started out with a small set of things and worked your way up to it. That lowering the price point for that and making it more accessible with a single gene cool ball being $250 isn't great if you breed those for your living. I wholeheartedly understand that. That is a valid viewpoint if that is how you pay your mortgage. Absolutely. But for somebody like me, exposing kids to all of this and the next set coming up, every time I do a birthday or a show or a library, they hey, can I get a lizard for my birthday? Can I get a snake for my birthday? Can I get, and then mom and dad come ask me, oh, what about this and that and the other thing? And if it's a lizard, every time I'm like, yeah, I probably got an extra bearded dragon, or Badgerland Reptile Rescue has got a bunch of cool stuff hanging out. Go rescue one. If I have a spare leopard gecko, I'll, you can buy the Exoterra and I'll help you out. Yeah, of course. I don't give them a tegu. They like to hold my tegu. They like to hang out and let the big male red tegu crawl all over them, and I make sure they're wearing pants so he doesn't rip their legs open. Because he's an adult male red tegu. Are you serious? Yeah. People come over to my shop. They want to get inside the iguana enclosure and stand by the tree and pet Shrek. Rock out. Go ahead. He's cool. He doesn't care. I stand there because when he climbs out, I make him climb on me because we don't trim his claws. He does it himself on his trees, and they'll go right into your shoulder. You don't need that when you're 7. You thought that was super cool, and then he jumped on me. Oh, hey, you know what else jumps? Crested geckos. So when you go tell your mom and dad you want a pet because you came to my thing, can I get a lizard for my birthday? That Shrek was really cool. Yeah, hey, look, this little derpy thing with eyelashes, it'll jump too, and it eats baby food. And yeah, there you go. Right? So I don't know. I really think we're in a way better place than folks originally made it out to be. I totally understand the folks that are upset about the auction thing from the idea of they breed reptiles for their living and that's going to lower price points for things. Well, that does mean less money for them, and that sucks for them. But that also tells you where the market's really at. And if you were pricing things for breeding value, then that value is held by breeders. I would bet it's a bunch of pet keepers that are bidding on things in auctions. And I have actually followed some of the ball python auctions. I don't know enough about the genetics and breeding and things to know. I am versed enough to know where some of the expensive stuff is, I guess, to know where the value's at. And some of the auctions are still going for big money. They really are. It is the single gene things, the old stuff from when we were kids that was cool that you couldn't get. Fireflies and a desert ghost that's just a plain old desert ghost. Like, it might not be a big deal now, but it was a big deal when I was in the hobby and it first came out and I couldn't get one. It'd be cool to have one now. Just, I always wanted one. Ball python's a cool snake anyway. Yeah, I'd pay $400 for that. Cool. I'm not going to pay $4,000 for that because I don't breed ball pythons. I just think that's cool. Panther chameleon's the same way. When I was younger, oh my God, red and blue bars, a yellow with bars, and the way they've bred them now, they look like paintings of the things that I saw when I was a kid. So they're unbelievably better, and I can afford it, as opposed to the crazy prices they were then. They were probably wild caught then, and so all these negative things. Now, yeah, cool. I could get one. If there's a way more of the getting one level people, I think that helps everybody. I really do. And it on the auction side, I see a lot more of the oddball stuff than I thought originally I would. There are newts up there right now. There's Armin's always got cool lizards in there. I'm fairly certain I saw Fairy Tale put some stuff in there. Yeah, just there aren't, people thought it was just going to be a ball python auction, and they are predominantly in there. They're predominantly in the hobby. That's how it is. But the other things are there. They are represented. And from what I've seen, just because I know those markets a little bit better, that's where I buy a lot of my things. Those are all pretty fair. The few things that I have bought, I got lucky. Were a little bit under market value. I got one snake way under market value. But that's kind of the luck of the draw for auctions. Sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. I've bought a handful of things through BSR, and all of those were fairly close to retail, a little bit under what a show price would be. But at the time when I was doing things like that, it was because it was like a show, and I saw 5 or 6 things that it was like, oh, if I got all of these, they would ship them for one price. So it ended up being like shopping at a show, because there was these handful of things that I wanted for my show purposes. I could just get them all at once. It wasn't individual things for me. So it was a little different. I get so much more out of nurturing a young person with a goal they want to reach, rather than the money guys who think money will get them there. Passion cannot be bought. Yeah, like absolutely. And you can see that, right? When you go to the NARBCs and you go to the big shows and you just hang out in herpetoculture long enough, like, there are people who are passionate about it and are into it. And there are people who do it as a business for investments. And both of those can work. It's fine. When you talk to those people, you can tell immediately. It's not difficult to do at all. And that comes with any hobby. I don't think that that's solely a reptile thing. Reptiles just happen to be our thing, and so it's more obvious to us. But that happens with everything. But I do agree with the whole idea of you see that where people buy a project, right? Or they have the cliche for reptile hobby, right, is you take your ball python money, buy something cool, and then you're going to breed that, and that's going to be your next revenue stream. And then somehow that never really works out, right? Well, yeah, you're not into it. That's not actually your thing. And selfishly, for nerds like me, I'm hanging out like, hey, I'm actually into that. Do you not want it anymore? Because you weren't really into it in the first place? Hook it up, dude. That's where nerds can come in and sales shop a little bit for people that weren't really into it. And yeah, like money guys fall away. Yes, they do. When you think in the long term, like that's the thing, is the explosion in the reptile hobby has made people think that long term is like 5 years ago or even 10 years ago. Like, that's no. you know in the context of making money the way some of those people were making money, yeah, 5 or 10 years was a long time, and maybe they made a lot of money. There's some folks have, that is true. Not all of those are still here. And it's like, well, that's weird. People don't usually walk away from a thing that pays them really well like that. That's strange. Why would you do that? You don't like it. It doesn't matter what it is. Eventually it will wear on you. You're not into it. It's not fun. You don't enjoy it. It just pays you. We're living at that. We're living that all over the world, particularly in our country now. People are struggling with that. Like, oh yeah, this keeps me afloat, but I hate it. Like that parlays over into your hobbies and things as well, because for those folks, it's not a hobby, it's a business. And so for all of us looking at it like that, you're like, oh my God, you make money breeding reptiles? Like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard of. Yeah, you're a reptile nerd. The other person is not. They're a person who is good with investments, good, bought the right equipment, can follow these directions well, is a wizard with HVAC or what have you, whatever it was that made them successful in keeping the parameters for their room or rack systems, or they had successful traits. Awesome. But they didn't wake up every day like, holy crap, I have a piebald ball python. They woke up every day with the stress of making a purple ball python or whatever it was. That's not fun. Like I don't think that would be fun either. And I am a reptile nerd. Yeah, it's those things kind of ebb and flow. And if you've been hanging out long enough, Mike and I are old and have been here for a long time. It becomes much more obvious over time, right? Because those people just aren't here, right? I know Mike from the kingsnake.com forum days. Like there are huge sections of the hobby currently that don't know that particular thing existed. So, I mean, that's a consequence of longevity. But no, I think we are in a really good place. I think rightly so. Totally agree. Some folks are struggling with that in those markets if they rely solely on those markets, which is unfortunate. But I think the reptile hobby itself, I think it's a net positive, and I think it's going to be good for us going forward. And it's the way the world is going. People are not doing well financially. Economics in our country, particularly here in the States, are struggling for a lot of people. And so there are any number of things that can affect that. And I just think that lower price point of entry level, there's a sweet spot above throwaway pet money and below that's not really a birthday present. That's you need to get a summer job money, right? There's some kind of happy medium there, totally dependent on your personal finances, obviously. But just for the average reptile show person showing up with their kid because they want a lizard or want a frog or whatever, there's got to be the happy medium, right? And I think we are a lot closer to that now than we have been, really, that I can think of, that I've been keeping reptiles. Because for me, it was always easier. Well, it was easier for me college and later because I had the capabilities to get in wild caught things and be successful with them. And your average entry level hobbyist does not. And so you had the ease of finance and then the barrier of actually keeping the animal long term or at all. And I think a lot of those things are coming together now, where a lot more animals are available, captive bred. The prices are better for entry level, quote unquote, things. And prices for difficult, advanced, dangerous, whatever things are appropriately, in my opinion, high. Wild caught stuff is still relatively cheap. It's a little bit more expensive now. Shipping is crazy for people. Totally understand. So prices go up for things that get shipped here in big boxes. But the social media side of things and the herpetoculture side of things has really like keyed that kind of stuff in and made a lot of people much more successful with those things because they are starting to specialize. People are really starting to hammer it down. We're breeding file snakes and trunk snake, all kinds of crazy stuff that I never in a million years thought would happen. And like file snakes are not common, but they're a lot more common than you would think they would be. That was a unicorn species for a long time. Yeah, I think we're in a really good spot. And I hope that it continues, obviously dependent on all sorts of economics for our country, as most things are. It is a hobby, and it's extra, it's a luxury, and that will be in effect for some folks going forward, of course. But I think it's in a good place. I really, really do. And yeah, all of that sparked from seeing a Euromastix in a big box store. But yeah, I think that's going to be really cool. So we are at an hour. The second part of this is I am going to, on the Sundays when I'm not doing Lizard Brain, so I'm going to continue to do Lizard Brain every other Sunday. My schedule is pretty set now, so I'm confident that I can keep the schedule and get back on track with all you guys. So that I don't think that'll be an issue going forward. But the alternate Sundays when I am not on for Lizard Brain, I am going to revive the Saurian Stories podcast, but in a different way. In Saurian Stories, I was picking a species and essentially telling their story, short format, description and habitat and things like that, and experiences I had of keeping them, if I had kept them, or whatever the case may be. And I am a huge fan of the book episodes and book club ideas and things that we do on Snakes and Stogies. And I had been just trying to figure out how to more consistently do that, or kind of only focus on that, or just put more focus on books in general. And I and many other people in the podcast realm talk about that a lot, that we want new people to reference books, people in general to reference books. And books in the reptile community are having a little bit of a resurgence this last probably 2 years, maybe a little bit longer. And I have been fortunate to know and meet and interview and talk to quite a few people that have written those books, which has been really cool. But my idea for Saurian Stories going forward is I am going to essentially do a book review. It will be every 2 weeks. And so I will tell the listener, the audience, whoever follows me over from Lizard Nerd to Book Nerd, what the book is. And then you can, if you have the book, you can read along. If you don't and you thought about getting the book, you can check it out, do research, read up on it, check out who the authors are, because I know and can link some of their social media for some of these folks. And then I will read either the book itself, if it's short enough to read in its entirety in 2 weeks, or the section, and then kind of like book club, just discuss it. I'll gonna take notes while reading them, and go over it with you. And I'm hoping that it will more or less be a book review, but in this format with the way the chat interacts and stuff like that. I'm hoping it can be, maybe not a selling point, it's not a great term, but like if you had an interest in that book, so you want to listen to that episode, maybe that will encourage you to get the book. A better explanation of the information available in the book, I suppose. People see a lot of these books online. A bunch of us share them. I always share it on my Instagram when I get new books. We talk about it in Snakes and Stogies. And then you're like, oh, well, why was that book cool? Why did you guys say to get the book? What, you just said what your top 5 books are, but like, why are they your top 5? And in those formats, it's really difficult for 3 or 4 of us hanging out on Snakes and Stogies to tell you why we each like these 5 books, show you stuff, whatever. That would take 4.5 hours. It would be very difficult, right? Whereas I think I can cut that down and do it individually, and maybe give folks more insight in more of a book review format. And I hope that it will like better convey that, I suppose. I have a fairly significant reptile library of old and new books. And I have short stuff that I can crank out in 2 weeks. I probably read a little bit too fast. And so I'm going to pick things that the average reader can hopefully get through in 2 weeks' time. And then for those longer books, we'll do chapters or what have you. And yeah, I'm going to take notes, dog ear them, put a bunch of stickies on them, and hang out and talk. It's probably going to be a little bit more on the nerdy side of things. I don't have very many books that aren't pretty species in depth. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I think it's going to be cool. I don't know if anybody else think it's cool. Every other Sunday, I'll be talking about a book. And so you can listen and read or not. I don't know. Yeah, I have a lot of people ask me about that in person and kind of oh, hey, what about this book? What about that? You guys talked about this, or did you see that? I probably have. I have so many books. And I also, that was a part of it, was my thought process for doing the Saurian stories is I have a fairly ridiculous library. And so if you don't, and you see us talking about these books on Snakes and Stogies, and you want to know more or check it out, or some of them are kind of expensive, especially the ones that aren't in print anymore, and you're trying to find it or whatever, are you really going to spend $200? Why? What is it for? Does it help with python reproduction? Does it help with dart frogs? Or is it just a cool book about the reptiles of Morocco? And I hope I can kind of convey that to folks in a little bit better way. And we'll see how it goes. I definitely have a library stack that those episodes could extend for a long time. Not nearly as long as discussing all of the lizard species, but I bet it's pretty close, because there's probably a book on nearly every one of them. And if there isn't, Mark O'Shea might end up writing it. I just got 2 more of his, one of his second editions and his Frogs of the World. So that should be pretty cool. I want to check those out. Yeah. So that is the plan going forward. I will see you guys again in 2 weeks for Lizard Brain Radio. And I will see you next Sunday if you want to come over and check out Saurian stories. All right. Later.